Well, that was a powerful way to start the morning. Good morning and welcome. My name is Annette Lovell, and this is the first time I've been behind the pulpit since we opened up for live person, so it's so good to see everybody. Oh, it's just marvelous. We welcome you in your joy or your discomfort today, in your body and your soul. We welcome you with open hearts and open arms as we are back here together again. And for you that continue to join us online, that's wonderful. And we welcome you via our changing and upgrading media system that we're figuring out as we go along. Thank you all for your patience. We all seek for a place to belong, a place to help us feel rooted and secure. And we hope that this place, whether we are meeting together or whether we are meeting virtually, fits that necessary connection. So everyone is welcome. We always like to start our service with a few announcements. First of all, if you are joining us online, make a quick note in the chat box to say hello so we know who's joining us. And use that same chat box to put joys, concerns, and sorrows in so that we can pull those off later in the service. Be aware, if you are online, that we are still having this underlying sound disturbance that's on the YouTube system. We're trying to figure it out. We don't know what's going on yet. Here in the sanctuary, however, joys and concerns are being done a little differently. There are some scraps of paper where Pam is standing right there in the back of the room. Write your joys and concerns on those and put them in the basket. I know it's a little disruptive and maybe uncomfortable to stand up and go grab those, but do that or get Pam's attention, and I bet she'll bring one to you. And then we will collect those and read them from the pulpit here a little bit later in the service. Don't forget to put your name on it. We are continuing to use virtual music like we had this morning and not singing hymns. There are many of us on the worship team that love singing and totally understand the power and the enjoyment we get from singing together. So we promise, as soon as we feel like it is safe to be able to do so, we will make that change. In the meantime, maybe we can make a really mighty buzz behind our mass today, and you can hum along. And as a reminder, we are not able to pass the offertory baskets yet as well. It is located at the very back of the sanctuary. On the back table. So any donations or pledges that you want to put in that basket on your way out or sometime today, that would be lovely. Or again, if you're online, we still have that give button in the upper right-hand corner. Or the P.O. Box, old-fashioned, we can still mail it to P.O. Box 50376. And of course, all monetary donations are gratefully received at all times. So I'm not aware of any other last-minute announcements. So let us prepare for worship with a few moments to settle in, calm our hearts, our minds, and our breathing. Just do some quiet breathing from your seats in the pew. Let go of unreachable expectations placed on you by others, or you might place on by yourself. Just listen to your breath. Let go of shame or guilt and open yourself to the possibilities of forgiveness and love. Just feel your breath. Let go of the mistakes you might have made yesterday. Let go of the things you might dread next week. Just be here in this moment, this Sunday morning. Take the time to breathe deeply and consciously, and I will ring the peace bowl 3 times. And we will begin with our prelude. Our church's covenant helps us remember why we are part of this faith and why we give our time and resources to this congregation. Please recite the words along with me if you remember the words or if you have an order of service. Love is the spirit of this community and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And every month there's a global chalice lighting shared with all congregations across the world. And our chalice lighting this morning comes from Germany, and it's shared by Dorothea Kaufmann for the month of November. I wanted to share it today. She says, "From the bottom of my very existence, I am pervaded with light energy, shining colors to my eye, warmth to my skin, inspiration to my soul. In this unity of creative sparks and sparkling creation, life unfolds. Let us open our senses to the light within and around us and send it out with shining examples into the world.
Good morning. Our call to worship this morning is the poem Earth Mother, Star Mother by Starhawk. Earth Mother, Star Mother, you who are called by 1,000 names, may all remember we are cells in your body and dance together. You are the grain and the loaf that sustains us each day. And as you are patient with our struggles to learn, so shall we be patient with ourselves and each other. We are radiant light and sacred dark. The balance, you are the embrace that heartens and the freedom beyond fear. Within you we are born, we grow, live, and die. You bring us around the circle to rebirth. Within us you dance forever. I invite you to enjoy our opening hymn, number 352, Find a Stillness.
The Naming of Cats by T.S. Eliot. The naming of cats is a difficult matter. It isn't just one of your holiday games. You may think at first I'm as mad as a hatter when I tell you a cat must have 3 different names. First of all, there's the name that the family use daily, such as Peter, Augustus, Alonzo, or James, such as Victor or Jonathan, George, or Bill Bailey. All of them sensible, everyday names. There are fancier names if you think they sound sweeter. Some for the gentlemen, some for the dames, such as Plato, Admetus, Electra, Demeter, but all of them sensible, everyday names. But I tell you, a cat needs a name that's particular, else how can he keep up his tail perpendicular, or spread out his whiskers, or cherish his pride? Of names of this kind I can give you a quorum, such as Moncastrap, Quaxo, or Coricopat, such as Bombalurina, or else Jelly Lorum, names that never belong to more than one cat. But above and beyond, there's still one name left over, and that is the name that you never will guess, the name that no human research can discover, but the cat himself knows and will never confess. When you notice a cat in profound meditation, the reason I tell you is always the same. His mind is engaged in a rapt contemplation of the thought of the thought of the thought of his name, his ineffable, effable, F and ineffable, deep and inscrutable, singular, name.
Before we share our joys and sorrows, are there any other that want to be shared? Bring it up. We have a few sorrows. I'm actually going to start with those this morning. One is from Nancy Frank. She says, the whole of Swan Valley is praying for the recovery of a pillar of their community, our beloved Stephen Martin. He is suffering from a dissected aorta and was flown from Ermac to Salt Lake this week. His physicians are waiting for his condition to stabilize before they attempt surgery. Please keep Maggie and his family in your hearts. She is still grieving after losing their daughter to COVID recently and now faces a very rough time ahead. We also, many of you may not know that Hank Bolin lost her husband Jim on November 10th. So we want to be thinking about Hank. Lisa Christensen has a sorrow. She says a longtime friend of hers died last week. She says, I'm so sad, and sadder because it was not at the top of my list of people to see when he returned to the East Coast. A reminder to see people you love often. It's a very good reminder. And we have a couple of joys. A joy from Cindy and Rob Logan. Said Rob was feeling unwell Friday morning, so he went for a COVID test. It was negative, thank goodness. Just a sinus thing, but it's a joy. That's a joy. And another joy from Victoria McDonald. Although our mic is being stubborn, she appreciates all the work that the tech team does to maintain our Sunday services. And I have to do a big hurrah for that one too. Yeah. And we will light one more candle to represent all those joys. Oh, hold on, chat box. I could not access the chat on YouTube on my phone, but Vic, is there any in the chat?
Well, actually, I have one of my own.
Oh,
the cardiologist in Salt Lake has signed off on my transplant, so I'm now active on the transplant list.
That is the best news to end on. Is there anything in the chat box? Okay. Then we will light one more candle to represent all joys, sorrows, and concerns we choose not to share at this time.
Our reading this morning is from an article called Knowing the Names of Things by David Didow. Many people have written many thousands of words about the difference between knowledge and understanding, but I think Richard Feynman nails it here. You can know the name of a bird in all the languages of the world, but when you're finished, you'll know absolutely nothing whatever about the bird. So let's look at the bird and see what it's doing. That's what counts. I learned very early the difference between knowing the name of something and knowing something. This is sometimes used to belittle the idea that knowing what things are called is useful. Of course, I agree that simply knowing the name of something is quite different to apprehending the thing itself. Knowing that Albert Einstein came up with the special theory of relativity tells you absolutely nothing whatever about what the theory means. That second kind of knowing, understanding if you prefer, takes study. The more you know about a thing, the better your understanding. The more you understand it, the better you'll know it. But even though knowing the name of something may be a very limited form of knowledge, does that mean learning names isn't worth the effort? Crucially, Feynman goes on to say, Knowing the names of things is useful if you want to talk to someone else, so you can tell them what you're talking about. And this is the point. We use names and labels for reasons of expediency. While I can say the theory that determined that the laws of physics are the same for all non-accelerating observers, which shows that the speed of light within a vacuum is the same no matter the speed at which the observer travels, it's quicker and easier to say Einstein's special theory of relativity. Likewise, I can say you can use a piece of punctuation that looks like a dot floating above a comma to connect two bits of a sentence if both bits could make sense on their own and were also closely related. But this is confusing and time-consuming. How much more efficient would it be if I could say a semicolon connects two closely related independent clauses? Not only is this more straightforward, it's less ambiguous. Knowing the names of things is insufficient, but it is perhaps necessary for clear communication. The trick, as Feynman reminds us, is to make sure we don't fool ourselves into thinking we know more than we do. Knowing when you know and when you don't know, and what it is you know and what it is you don't know, is the work of a lifetime. On a rainy spring afternoon in April 1992, my wife and I were huddled with a few other hikers in a three-sided shelter on the Appalachian Trail in North Carolina at a place called Sassafras Gap. As we sat there trying to keep warm and waiting for the rain to end, one of the hikers we had met a few days earlier was reading through a book on bird identification that he had picked up a few days earlier. And we started talking about the various birds we had encountered during our weeks on the trail. And before long, the conversation turned to the question about the importance of knowing the official name for a bird, or anything else for that matter. How do names impact the way we relate to the world? For example, does knowing that the beautiful blue bird you watched for several minutes is called an indigo bunting enhance your appreciation of it? Or does it in some way limit the magic and wonder of your encounter? I'm not talking about what you might learn from about the bird from a guidebook, truly getting to know more about the species and the behavior the way Feynman described in our reading. I'm simply talking about how we experience the creature between the time we encountered the beautiful blue bird in the forest until we learn its official name. I'm speaking about the sentiment expressed by Juliet in Shakespeare's play when she says, "What's in a name? That which we call a rose, by any other word would smell as sweet." Is the sweetness of the encounter enhanced or diminished by a name? And how about sharing the story of our encounter with others? I could describe the bird's size and shape, its beautiful blue plumage, the way it moved, and so on, and each of you would form a mental image that would vary in the details. But if you're an avid birder, and I told you I saw an indigo bunting, you might quickly form a relatively accurate mental image of my bird based on your own experience and shared knowledge of the species. Names are, of course, very useful and necessary symbols for communication, but they also limit the way we categorize and process information. When we are born, we do not appear to come into the world with a pre-programmed set of symbols and symbolic concepts, though admittedly some might disagree. I believe we can only experience the world through our senses, and when we convert the data we receive by learning how to arrange it into patterns of thought. As we develop, we learn the symbolic language and cultural symbols that have emerged from the many generations of those who came before us. From the basic names for everyday objects to more abstract concepts like love and compassion. It is how we interpret and find meaning in the world, and how we learn the morals and cumulative wisdom of the society into which we were born. Though we all share a common, objectively real physical world, this means that each of us also inhabits an internal, interpreted world that is our own unique reality, constructed through the inference of our senses and our creative human imagination. And this presents some startling implications. As the physicist Bruce Gregory describes it, the stubbornly physical nature of the world we encounter every day is obvious. The minute we begin to talk about this world, however, it somehow becomes transformed into another world, an interpreted world, a world delimited by language. Language connects us to each other's interpreted world. The places and objects we name tell a story that also connects the present with the past and the future. The names we were given at birth, or a name we may have chosen for ourselves, are especially important in forming our identity and perspective as part of the story. So too with tribal names, and later with names of cities, nations, and empires. Once we humans began to develop religious ideas, some symbolic names became extremely powerful. And in the Western world, at least, the symbol God became the most important conceptual symbol imagined. and the most hotly debated. For the ancient Hebrews, the actual name of God was thought to be so powerful it could not be uttered by human beings. In the Hebrew Scriptures, the name of God was generally written with 4 Hebrew consonants known as the Tetragrammaton, which is usually translated into English as capital YHWH. It can be spoken as Yahweh or Jehovah, but in common reading, the word Adonai, which means the Lord, is often substituted. The Tetragrammaton is introduced in Genesis and occurs 6,828 times in the Masoretic text of the Hebrew Bible. It is believed to convey the meaning of God as I am that I am. There are also 15 other names for God in the Jewish scriptures. These range from El, which is thought to be one of the most ancient Semitic names for God, to more descriptive names such as El Shaddai, which means God Almighty, and Elyon, which means Most High or Supreme. After Christians adopted the Hebrew Scriptures, many of these names were kept, but the Greek word kurios, meaning Lord, became more common, and along with theos, which means God. Once the Latin Vulgate came along, the Tetragrammaton was generally replaced with Dominus, which also means Lord. And if 16 names for God seems insufficient, you should consider the Islamic tradition. According to one source in the Hadith literature of Islam, the Prophet Muhammad says, Allah has 99 names, and whoever knows them will go to paradise. In addition to the name Allah, which is believed to come from the same ancient Semitic source as the Jewish names El and Eloah, there are 99 names for God in Islam, which are mostly descriptive, and they're more like attributes or titles of God. These are names such as Ar-Rahman, the most merciful, and Al-Aziz, the Almighty. I find it interesting that the 3 great monotheistic faiths have so many names for God. But beyond the names for God given in ancient scriptures, there are many other ways to conceptualize God or the sacred in the metaphors that resonate with us due to our culture or personal experience. And this is true among those who profess belief in one God or many gods, as well as more abstract notions about the sacred in nature or some other source. On the surface, this may seem trivial, but it is reflected in differing worldviews that impact the way we relate to each other in society. It is one of the factors that stokes the divisions that seem to be growing more vitriolic and dangerous every day. Very little research has been done in this area, but a recent study published in July of this year looked at the question of metaphor and worldview directly. The researchers interviewed 2,923 American undergraduate students who predictably came from a predominantly Christian background, asking them open-ended questions about God as present or absent in a variety of metaphorical categories. These were categories such as God is light, God is human, God is a man. In an interview about the study, one of the researchers said, the biggest takeaway from this study is that while people vary in the metaphors they use to describe God, which is important in itself, there are some consistent patterns. God is most often described in terms of power, that is, creator, almighty, as human or anthropomorphic, bearded man in the sky, and male, he, father. People seem to understand God in terms that are most familiar to them, the human. This is likely because our thinking is constrained to our bodies. That means the easiest way we can understand something like the God concept is to imagine some sort of human entity. This is why God's actions are often described using human-like traits. I'm not surprised at all by the results, and you can make the same statement about the gods of many cultures throughout history. The researchers were frank about the narrow religious views of most respondents, and they called for further research in different and more diverse groups. You could easily look at other historical examples as well, such as the antics of Zeus and the other gods of Greek mythology, who often displayed the pettiness of human behavior and meddled in human affairs. The study seems to confirm Xenophanes' famous criticism of the Homeric gods that if horses and oxen had hands and could draw pictures, their gods would look remarkably like horses and oxen. More importantly, the study's authors also suggested that the emphasis on the human-like nature of God could point to either a benevolent or authoritarian concept of God, depending on an individual's experience and culture. How we name and conceptualize our understanding of the divine could make some of the worst human ideologies and behaviors more acceptable and appealing by cloaking them with divine authority. This is how a fascist could see no contradiction in promoting a despicable and bigoted worldview while professing a belief in God. A handful of modern white supremacists and neo-Nazis have found the old Norse gods to be a better fit, but most still claim to be Christian in some way. The God of their imagining is authoritarian and merciless. But I like to believe that symbols like God are mostly imagined as representing the good in the world and the awe and wonder of the human experience. Having the capacity to even hold such ideas is its own source of awe and wonder in a vast cosmos with no other life yet confirmed to exist beyond our planet, let alone life forms with similar symbolic thinking. There's a wonderful passage about the human concept of God in Dostoevsky's novel, The Brothers Karamazov, spoken by his character Ivan Karamazov, who says, "What is strange, what is marvelous, is not that God really exists. The marvel is that such an idea, the idea of the necessity of God, could have entered the head of such a savage and vicious beast as man. So holy it is, so moving, so wise, and such a great honor it does to man." I have to say that I can only partly agree with Ivan on this one. I believe there is a natural human inclination to spiritual exploration that resides deep within us. And it is a response to an ineffable something that I often call the great mystery that tugs at our sense of being alive in this beautiful, interdependent web of existence. It seems only natural and even inevitable that our species, with our capacity for self-reflection, has developed many ideas about spirits and gods or a god in an attempt to name that ineffable feeling and find meaning in our relationship to it. And we don't have to believe in God in the traditional sense for this to be true. One of my favorite theologians is the New Zealander Lloyd Gehring, who has written extensively about the concept of God and the use of God language. He is considered a non-realist theologian, meaning that he considers God to be a symbolic metaphor rather than having an objective reality. Whether or not we like the word God, I think he sums up the importance of naming the holy nicely in this passage from his book, Tomorrow's God. At the very least, God is a useful symbolic word to hold together the mystery of the universe, the value of life, the moral imperatives, the goal of personal fulfillment, and the meaning of human existence. The God symbol refers to the sum total of all that concerns us most. It can call forth from us the same gamut of emotions of awe, wonder, gratitude, and obligation as it did in the past when our forebears had a very different view of reality. Yes, names are important symbols, and the meaning of these symbols may evolve over time. No matter how we choose to name what is sacred to us, let us find comfort and meaning in calling forth that awe, wonder, gratitude, and obligation. The name we give to the holy imbues it with a spiritual content that says something about us. May we be worthy of those aspirations and values we invoke. Our closing hymn is number 23, Bring Many Names. Our closing words of the poem, The Importance of Names, by Clifton Snyder. The black-faced lion tamarin, tell me, did such an animal exist for thousands of years on an island off Brazil called Suparaqui before the scientists named it? Call me Clifton then, Cliff with one F, Snyder with an I. Call me poet, professor, Piscean, friend, partner, lover of men, introvert, a thinking, intuitive type, right-brained, and, yes, an egotist. Call me names that fade into remote history. names given to initiates at Eleusis or Delphi, names given to boys emerging from the kiva, sacred, secret, comical names bestowed by an honored Bradash, his/her identity protected by his/her own puberty vision. Call me the human person I am alone for you, the name you yourself prefer. Please do make it visceral, a spirit name, sweet, fresh as coffee or lemon blossoms, strong as a bluff, flexible as a seabird, easy to pronounce, ineffable, inscrutable. Above all, make it me.
First of all, we'd like to thank Jessica for all of her musical sharing of her talents today. And we will close our service with our extinguishing of our chalice. Please read with me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. There is no coffee hour. We will congregate preferably outside if you want to say hello to people. It is time for our prelude. Be safe and be well.